Have you ever wondered if your hamster was trying to tell you that something was wrong, but you never noticed? Right now, your hamster might be sensing something that most owners never notice, not because they don't care, nor because they're bad owners, but because hamsters communicate in incredibly easy ways that go unnoticed. When people think of emotional pain, they imagine obvious signs: a cry for help, a dramatic reaction, a clear warning that something is wrong. But hamsters don't work that way. They are small prey animals. In nature, showing weakness can be dangerous. That's why many of their struggles remain hidden. They often stay quiet. They keep eating. They keep exploring. They continue following their daily routines. Meanwhile, stress, fear, or discomfort may be slowly building up in the background. That's what makes it all so disturbing. Many hamster owners believe that as long as they provide food, water, and a clean cage, everything will be fine. But what if some of the most common things people do every day are actually undermining the trust the hamster places in their relationship? What if actions that seem harmless from a human perspective are perceived completely differently from a hamster's point of view? A hand reaching into the cage, a sudden change in routine, a place that no longer inspires confidence, a moment of fear that is ignored. None of this seems dramatic. However, for a hamster, it can mean much more than we imagine. And the worst part is that most owners never connect these small moments to the behaviors that appear later. The hamster hiding, the nervousness, the loss of trust, the distance that slowly grows between the hamster and the owner. Today, we're going to reveal 7 things that secretly break your hamster's heart. And after understanding what they are, you'll never see your hamster or its daily habits the same way again. Most people think a hamster's cage is just a place to eat, sleep, and spend the day. To us, it's a habitat, a small enclosure full of bedding, toys, food bowls, and hiding places. But your hamster sees it in a very different way. For your hamster, that cage is a whole world. It's the place where they feel protected, the place where they learn what is familiar and what is safe. Every tunnel, every smell, every corner becomes part of a mental map that helps them navigate life without fear. Therefore, one of the most painful things a hamster can experience is losing that sense of security in the place it trusts most. Imagine waking up one day and discovering that your entire house has been rearranged overnight. The furniture is gone. The familiar smells have vanished. Nothing is where you expected it to be. You would feel confused, maybe even anxious. Now imagine experiencing this confusion as a small prey animal whose survival depends on knowing exactly where safety is. This is something many owners do without realizing it. They change all the bedding at once. They frequently move the toys and hiding places around. They make major alterations to the cage because they want it to look cleaner or more interesting. Their intentions are good. But from the hamster's perspective, something important may have gone missing: familiarity. And familiarity is deeply linked to safety. Hamsters rely heavily on their sense of smell to recognize their surroundings. When all familiar scents suddenly disappear, they may feel as if their safe world has been replaced by a strange and unpredictable environment. That's when the stress starts to appear. Perhaps they hide more often. Perhaps they will become less active. They may seem nervous now, whereas before they were confident. What seems like a simple cage cleaning to us may appear as a loss of stability to them. Because sometimes what breaks a hamster's heart isn't the danger itself. It's the feeling of insecurity in the only place that should always be a home. But what many owners don't realize is that safety alone isn't enough. Because the next thing that can silently harm your hamster's emotional well-being is something most people do with the best possible intentions. Before we move on to the next reason, there's something important to remember. Most hamster owners will never discover what their pet is really trying to communicate. They will observe the behaviors, but never understand the meaning behind them. They will notice the hiding habit, the nervousness, the sudden changes, but they will never discover what caused them. You're already different. You're taking the time to understand the world through your hamster's eyes, and that's something very few owners do. So, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Not because it helps the channel, although it does, but because every week we reveal the hidden meanings behind hamsters' behavior, trust, fear, comfort, and emotional connection. This is information that most owners never hear about. Here's the reality. People who truly understand their hamsters are usually the ones who build the strongest bonds with them. So don't miss the next discoveries we'll be sharing. Because one of the biggest mistakes hamster owners make is the following, and it may already be affecting your hamster without you realizing it. One of the biggest mistakes hamster owners make is assuming that love automatically creates trust. That seems reasonable. After all, you feed your hamster every day. You clean its cage. You buy toys, treats, and everything it needs to live comfortably. From your point of view, you're doing everything right. But trust doesn't work that way in a hamster's mind, because your hamster doesn't judge you based on your intentions. She judges you based on her own experiences. Imagine being a tiny animal surrounded by creatures hundreds of times larger than you. Every movement seems enormous. Every shadow could appear menacing. Every unfamiliar interaction has the potential to generate caution. This is the reality in which your hamster was born. Even living safely inside their homes, the instincts that helped their ancestors survive are still deeply rooted in their brains. That's why trust takes time. Unfortunately, many owners unknowingly rush the process. The moment they bring the hamster home, they want to hold it, play with it, and interact with it all the time. They imagine that frequent handling will help create a bond more quickly. But from the hamster's perspective, something very different might be happening. A giant hand keeps entering your space. A giant creature keeps trying to touch him. A giant shadow keeps appearing above us. And he still doesn't fully understand if any of these things are safe. Initially, the hamster may tolerate interaction. It may freeze. It may remain motionless. Many owners mistake this for calmness. But sometimes, there's nothing calm about it. It's the uncertainty. And uncertainty can silently transform into fear. The more pressure a hamster feels before a trusting relationship is established, the more likely it is to associate your presence with stress rather than comfort. That's when the curiosity starts to fade. Trust is starting to disappear, and fear begins to take its place. What's most fascinating is that the strongest bonds are often built by owners who act more calmly. They allow the hamster to approach first. They respect its boundaries. They understand that trust cannot be demanded. Because for a hamster, trust is not something that can be given. It's something you earn. And what breaks a hamster's heart even more is when it tries to communicate its discomfort. But no one notices the warning signs. Before biting, hiding, or starting to avoid interactions, hamsters are usually trying to communicate something important. The problem is that most owners never recognize these signals. They aren't ignoring the hamster on purpose. They just don't realize that hamsters speak a very different language. When people think of communication, they think of words, sounds, or obvious reactions. But hamsters communicate through behavior, small changes, subtle signals, moments that seem insignificant unless you know what to look for. A hamster that suddenly freezes when your hand approaches may be trying to tell you it's uncomfortable. A hamster that repeatedly hides may be asking for space. A hamster that becomes exceptionally cautious in interactions may be communicating that something no longer feels safe. The saddest thing is that these warnings are often misinterpreted. Many owners see a hamster hiding and assume it's being shy. They see hesitation and think the hamster is being stubborn. They see avoidance and assume the hamster simply doesn't like being handled. But the reality may be quite different. Your hamster may be trying to communicate stress, fear, or uncertainty long before a bite even occurs. And when these signs repeatedly go unnoticed, frustration begins to build. Not the kind of frustration humans feel, but the growing emotional tension that arises from feelings of insecurity and not being heard. Eventually, the hamster may run out of subtle ways to communicate. It is at this point that the behavior becomes most obvious. That's where a bite can occur. Not because the hamster suddenly became aggressive. Not because I want to hurt you. But that's because all the more subtle messages failed to get his attention. Sometimes, what owners see as a problem is actually a last warning. A final attempt by a small animal to communicate something it has been trying to say for much longer than anyone imagined. Most hamster owners don't realize how important routine is for their pets. To us, routines can seem boring. We generally like change, variety, and spontaneity, but your hamster experiences the world in a very different way. For a hamster, routine isn't about convenience. It's about security. Every day, your hamster learns patterns. It learns when the lights usually turn on. It learns when food appears. It learns when the environment is quiet and when activity begins. These predictable moments help create a sense of stability in a world that might otherwise seem overwhelming. When these routines change suddenly, your hamster can become confused long before you realize something is wrong. Imagine if every day were unpredictable. Meals arrived at random times. Your environment constantly changed. You never knew what to expect when you woke up. Over time, this uncertainty would generate stress. The same thing can happen to your hamster. Frequent changes in feeding schedules, sudden alterations in daily interactions, or constant changes in the environment can make it difficult for a hamster to feel secure. What seems like a small adjustment to us may feel to them as the loss of something reliable. And for an animal that serves as prey, predictability is important. This helps them relax. This helps them feel safe. This allows them to explore their environment with confidence, rather than caution. What's especially sad is that many owners make these changes with good intentions. They want to improve their hamsters' lives. They want to make things more interesting. But sometimes, what a hamster needs most isn't exactly excitement. Sometimes, what they need is consistency. Because deep down, your hamster isn't looking for surprises. He is looking for security. And when that security disappears, even temporarily, it can silently erode the sense of safety and comfort they worked so hard to build within their little world. I want to ask you a question. What's the strangest or most confusing thing your hamster has ever done? Maybe he suddenly started hiding. Maybe he slipped away from your hand for no apparent reason. Or maybe he did something you never understood. Share your story in the comments. The most interesting thing is that many owners discover they are not alone. By reading the comments, you can find someone who has gone through the exact same situation with their own hamster. And who knows, the answer you're looking for might lie in another owner's experience. So tell me, what's the most mysterious behavior your hamster has ever exhibited? Many people believe that hamsters are completely independent animals. They assume that as long as a hamster has food, water, and a clean cage, it doesn't matter if someone interacts with it. But the reality is much more complex than that. Although hamsters are not social animals in the same way as dogs or cats, they still become familiar with the world around them. They learn routines, recognize smells, perceive patterns, and over time, begin to associate certain experiences with comfort and safety. That's why prolonged loneliness can affect a hamster in ways that many owners never consider. This doesn't mean your hamster wants constant attention. In fact, too much interaction can be stressful, but a complete lack of stimulation can be equally harmful. Imagine living every day in the exact same environment, with nothing new to explore, no positive interactions, and no significant changes to your routine. Slowly, the world begins to seem smaller. The same thing can happen with a hamster. A hamster that doesn't receive environmental stimulation can become less curious. It may spend more time hiding, sleeping, or repeating the same behaviors over and over. The excitement that once motivated exploration begins to fade. What's heartbreaking is that this change usually happens so gradually that owners don't even notice it. They see a quiet hamster, a calm hamster, a hamster that looks content. But sometimes, what appears to be contentment is actually boredom and emotional detachment. Ultimately, your hamster still needs reasons to explore, reasons to maintain its curiosity, reasons to interact with its environment. Because a hamster's life is not just about survival. It's about feeling secure enough to be interested in the world. And when that interest slowly fades, something important disappears along with it. A small fragment of the joy that makes your hamster who it is. I want to ask you a question. What's the strangest or most confusing thing your hamster has ever done? Maybe he suddenly started hiding. Maybe he slipped away from your hand for no apparent reason. Or maybe he did something you never understood. Share your story in the comments. The most interesting thing is that many owners discover they are not alone. By reading the comments, you can find someone who has gone through the exact same situation with their own hamster. And who knows, the answer you're looking for might lie in another owner's experience. So tell me, what's the most mysterious behavior your hamster has ever exhibited? Trust rarely disappears all at once. More often, it erodes gradually through a series of experiences that make the hamster feel insecure or uncertain. Initially, the changes are almost impossible to notice. Perhaps your hamster hesitates before approaching your hand. Perhaps he is more easily startled than before. Perhaps he spends a little more time hiding. Each moment seems small in isolation, but together they can begin to reshape how your hamster sees the world. This is how fear gradually replaces trust. A hamster that is repeatedly frightened, handled too frequently, or placed in situations it doesn't understand may begin to expect discomfort instead of safety. Over time, curiosity starts to give way to caution. Trust gives way to hesitation. What's heartbreaking is that generally the owners don't realize this is happening. They still love the hamster, they still want to bond with it, but From the hamster's perspective, the relationship may be starting to seem unpredictable. And unpredictability generates stress. The hamster doesn't suddenly decide to stop trusting. Instead, each negative experience adds a small layer of doubt. One layer leads to another, and then another, until, eventually, the hamster begins to react defensively to situations that previously seemed completely normal. That's why trust is so precious. It takes time to build, but just a few repeated moments of fear are enough to begin weakening it. The good news is that trust can often be rebuilt. Patience, consistency, and respecting your hamster's boundaries can help restore the sense of security that has been lost. Because most hamsters don't like living in fear. They want to feel safe. And when they feel safe, something incredible happens. The fear that once kept them apart is slowly beginning to give way to trust again. Perhaps the biggest mistake hamster owners make is assuming that their hamsters see the world the same way they do. We look at a cage and see a small, habitable space. We look at our hand and see something friendly. We rearrange the toys, change the routines, or pick up our hamster because we know our intentions are good. But your hamster doesn't experience the world through human understanding. She experiences the world through instinct, safety, and trust. What seems insignificant to you may seem enormous to a small prey animal: a sudden movement, an unfamiliar smell, a loud noise, a hand reaching down from above. These moments may last only seconds, but they can have a powerful emotional impact. Therefore, understanding your hamster requires more than simply taking care of it. This requires empathy. The ability to step outside your own perspective and imagine how the world appears from their perspective. When you start doing this, everything changes. Hiding is no longer difficult for a hamster. A hesitant hamster is no longer stubborn. A bite is no longer just a problem. Instead, these behaviors are transformed into messages, clues that reveal what your hamster is feeling and experiencing. And that's what differentiates good owners from truly excellent ones. Good owners don't just provide food, water, and shelter. They learn to listen. They pay attention to the small signs that most people ignore. Because the truth is, your hamster doesn't need a perfect owner. You don't need someone who never makes mistakes. All it takes is someone willing to understand. Someone willing to see the world through your eyes. And when that happens, something beautiful begins to bloom. It's not just about care. It's not just about routine, but genuine trust. That kind of trust that transforms a small animal into a true companion and turns an ordinary relationship into something much more meaningful. Before you go, I want you to remember something. Most people only see a hamster as a small pet that lives inside a cage. But anyone watching this video knows there's more to it. They know that all behavior has a meaning. Every reaction tells a story. And every moment of trust is something special. If you've watched this far, you're probably the type of owner who wants to understand your hamster, not just take care of it. You're someone who pays attention to detail. Someone who wants to build a true bond with the little animal that depends on you every day. And that's exactly what this community is all about. So, if you believe that hamsters deserve to be understood and not just owned, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Join thousands of owners who are learning to see their hamsters in a different way, to understand their emotions, and to build stronger relationships with them. Because the more we understand these incredible little animals, the closer we get to them. And if you're part of that group, you're in the right place. See you in the next video.